pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Members and guests may be seated. Reading of the Journal.
Journal of the House of Delegates, Charleston, Friday, February 26, 2021.
Gentleman to second, Douglas DeCerio.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read.
Gentleman to second asks unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and that it be approved as having been read. Are there objections? There are no objections. Lady from the 49th for an update on the calendar.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Update on the calendar today. Special calendar, third reading HDR 2 to House calendar. Second reading committee substitute for SB 272, 2363, and 2628 to House calendar.
Introduction of guests. Lady of the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Our doctor of the day is Dr. Tracy Hendershot from Elizabeth, West Virginia, and her fourth-year medical student that's with her, Colby Tonkovich from Morgantown. Please make them welcome.
Reports of standing committees.
Your Committee on Technology and Infrastructure has had under consideration committee substitute for House Bill 2002 relating to broadband. Reports the same back with amendment with the recommendation that it do pass as amended.
Report will be received. Are there further reports of standing committees? If not, reports of select committees. Messages from the executive. Messages from the Senate.
The Clerk of the Senate announces the Senate has passed without amendment House Bill 2019 Elevating Economic Development and Tourism Departments.
Message will be received.
The Senate has passed committee substitute for Senate Bill 80, allowing for administration of certain small estates by affidavit and without appointment of personal representative.
Message will be received. Bill will be referred to the Committee on Judiciary.
The Senate has passed Senate Bill 459, relating to return of members' paid contributions to heirs after a member's death under certain circumstances.
The message will be received. The bill will be referred to the Committee on Finance. Are there further reports of standing committees or messages of the Senate? If not, resolutions.
House Concurrent Resolution 16, Private First Class Franklin D. Fraser Memorial Road.
Resolution will be referred to the Committee on Technology and Infrastructure, then the Committee on Rules. Petitions, motions, bills introduced.
House Bill 2792, relating to expansion of direct access to natural gas for new customers.
Lady from the 49th.
Mr. Speaker, I ask unanimous consent that the further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as indicated on the delegate console system.
The lady from the 49th asks unanimous consent that further reading of bills introduced be dispensed with and that each bill be considered as having been formally introduced and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the delegate console system. Are there objections? There are no objections. Unfinished business. Bills on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2267, establishing an optional bus operator and residence program for school districts.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. The gentleman to 13th, Douglas Higginbotham, is recognized to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. This bill permits county boards of education to establish a locally funded recruitment and training program for prospective bus operators. A county board may establish such a program if it is unable to maintain an adequate number of bus operators in its pool or has experienced a shortage in adequately staffing its transportation system. The bill in no way changes the operation of existing bus operator and training programs, but as an aid in recruitment, it allows the County Board of Ed to provide a stipend to be paid to participants, reimburse participant costs, or to provide other benefits upon successful completion. That is the bill, Mr. Speaker, and I encourage passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to passage of the bill? If not, then the question is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there were 93 ayes, 0 nays, and 7 members absent and not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2267, establishing an optional bus operator and residence program for school districts.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Next bill on third reading.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2616, amend the reporting to the governor and the legislature to have information continuously available on the Office of Health Facility Licensure and Certifications website.
Are there objections to having the bill explained in lieu of having it read? There are no objections. The gentleman of the 28th, Douglas Pack, to explain the bill.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Currently, DHHR is required to submit a written report on residential care communities to the governor and legislature on an annual basis. The change will require DHHR through OFLAC to post this information on its website. There's currently only one residential care community in the state. That's the bill, Mr. Speaker. I urge its passage.
The question before the House is, shall the bill pass? Are there members who wish to speak to passage of the bill? If not, then the question is, shall the bill pass? Those in favor of passage will vote aye. Those opposed will vote no. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the result. On that question, there are 93 ayes, 0 nays, and 7 members absent not voting. A majority of members having voted in the affirmative, the chair declares the bill passed. The clerk will please report the title.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2616, amend the reporting to the governor and the legislature to have information continuously available on the Office of Health Facility Licensure and Certifications website.
Are there amendments to the title? If not, the title as read by the clerk will be and remain the title of the bill. The clerk will please communicate the action of the House to the Senate. Are there further bills on third reading? If not, bills on second reading, bills on first reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 277, creating COVID-19 Jobs Protection Act.
Bill to be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2024, expand use of telemedicine to all medical personnel.
The bill to be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2025, provide liquor, wine, and beer licensees with some new concepts developed during the state of emergency, utilizing new technology to provide greater freedom to operate in a safe and responsible manner.
The bill to be advanced.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2093, relating to exemptions for the United States Department of Veterans Affairs medical foster homes.
The bill to be advanced.
House Bill 2791, relating to enrollment and costs of homeschooled or private schooled students at vocational schools.
The bill to be advanced. Are there further bills on first reading? If not, leaves of absence. Lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. For our colleagues, Delegate Booth, Bridges, I think Doyle just walked in, Ellington, Holstein, Hornbuckle, and Thompson.
Are there objections to leaves of absence being granted? The chair hears no objections. Leaves of absences shall be granted. Introduction of guests, miscellaneous business. If not, lady from the 49th.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I move, subject to announcements, the House adjourn until 11 a.m. Tuesday, March 2nd.
Are there announcements? The gentleman of the 10th, Douglas Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Finance will meet today, March 1st at 4 p.m. in the House chambers. Also, Republican members of the Finance Committee will meet in the Finance Committee room at 3:30. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman of the 32nd, Douglas Fast.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Judiciary will meet today at 2 p.m. Government Organization Room. The agenda has been posted. 2 p.m. today.
Lady in the 49th, Douglas Summers.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Rules will meet tomorrow morning at 10:45 in the House Judiciary Room.
The gentleman of the 13th, Douglas Higginbotham.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Education will meet tomorrow, Tuesday, March 2nd at 1 p.m. in the House chamber. The agenda will be posted. That's tomorrow at 1 p.m. Additionally, Democrats of the Education Committee will caucus at 11:30 today upstairs in the committee room. So caucus today, and then Republicans will caucus at 12, also upstairs in the committee room. Committee tomorrow, caucus today.
Gentleman of the 10th, Douglas Chris.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Failed to mention that the agenda today will be House Bill 2013. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman of the 15th, Douglas Foster.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Government Organization will meet today at 1 p.m. in the Government Organization Committee Room, and the agenda is posted.
The gentleman of 17th, Dr. Rohrbach.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Your Committee on Health and Human Resources will meet tomorrow morning at 9 a.m. in the Government Organization Conference Room. Thank you.
The lady from 38th, Dr. Graves.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Republican freshmen will caucus. Now, this is just the freshmen, Republican freshmen, in the East Wing Government Organization Room immediately following floor session.
The gentleman of 28th, Dr. Pack.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. AARP is providing lunch tomorrow, Tuesday, March the 2nd. Boxed lunches can be picked up in the Great Hall right outside the chamber at 11:30 a.m. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
The gentleman of 13th, Dr. Pinson.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. The Faith First Caucus will meet tomorrow morning, March 2nd at 8 a.m. Our meeting will be held in the McManus Meeting Room. That's room 252. Again, the Faith First Caucus will meet tomorrow, March 2nd, 8 a.m., room 252. Thank you, Mr. Speaker.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question before the House is the motion by the lady from the 49th that the House stand adjourned at 11 a.m. tomorrow. Those in favor, please say aye. Those opposed, please say no. The ayes have it. The motion is adopted. The House is adjourned at 11 a.m. tomorrow.
Senate will come to order. All those not having privileges at the floor will please vacate the chamber. Those in the gallery and those on the floor will please rise as we led in prayer by the senior senator from the 8th. Please remain standing after the prayer as the senator from Brooke leads us in reciting the Pledge of Allegiance. Senator.
Let us pray. Almighty God, as we gather today, we ask that you will be in our midst. Father, we ask for your blessings and thank you for your wisdom. Lord, guide our hearts and our minds in a spirit of fairness. Help us to make decisions that will be pleasing to you. May you remind us all that we do here for you today. All that we do, may it be accomplished for your greater glory. And Father, we ask, Lord, that you guide us by your Holy Spirit. In Jesus' name, and amen.
Thank you. Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Will the members and guests that we may have join us in pledging the flag? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Reading of the journal.
West Virginia Legislature Senate Journal, February 26, 2021. The Senate met at 11:01 a.m. Senator Blair, Mr. President, in the chair.
The senator from Mercer requests unanimous consent that further reading of the journal be dispensed with and the journal be approved. Is there objection? Chair hears none. Further reading of the journal is dispensed with and the journal is approved. Introduction of guests. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. On behalf of the Senate, it's my pleasure and yours to introduce our doc of the day. We have with us in the rear of the chamber a veteran of the doc of the day, Dr. Tracy Hendershot, and he has with him a fourth-year medical student, Colby Tonkovich. If they wouldn't mind standing, let the Senate give you a warm welcome.
Further introductions. Senior Senator from the 5th.
Thank you, Mr. President. It's my privilege and Senator from Cabell's privilege to introduce the Paul Ambrose Fellows. As Dr. Hendershot was a Paul Ambrose Fellow, so are Dr. Afgar and Dr. Weinblatt. Please welcome them.
Further introductions. Communications from the House.
The Clerk of the House announced the passage by that body of House Bill 2265 relating to collaborative pharmacy practice and updating rulemaking authority.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Health and Human Resources.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2290 initiating a state employment first policy to facilitate integrated employment of disabled persons.
The message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Workforce and then on the Committee of Finance.
Committee substitute for House Bill 2529, prohibiting West Virginia institutions of higher education from discriminating against graduates of private, non-public, or home schools by requiring them to submit to alternative testing.
Message will be received and the bill will be referred to the Committee on Education.
The House adopted House Concurrent Resolution 15, Rare Disease Day.
Message will be received and the resolution will be referred to the Committee of Health and Human Resources. Communications from the Executive.
There are none.
Reports from standing committees.
Your Committee on the Judiciary has had under consideration Senate Bill 263, permitting online raffles to benefit nonprofit organizations, and reports back a committee substitute for same. Senate Bill 332, providing procedure for West Virginia to select delegates to Article 5 Convention, and reports back a committee substitute for same. And Senate Bill 345, expanding alcohol test and lock program to include offenders with drug-related offense, and reports back a committee substitute for same, with the recommendation that the three committee substitutes do pass. Respectfully submitted, Charles S. Trump IV, Chair.
The report will be received. Reports from select committees.
There are none.
Introduction of bills. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that Senate Bill 477 through Senate Bill 514 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system.
Senior Senator from the 17th requests unanimous consent that Senate Bill 477 through Senate Bill 514 be considered introduced, read by their titles, and referred to the appropriate committees as shown on the chamber automation system. Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Resolutions.
Senate Concurrent Resolution 10 by Senators Smith, Azinger, Boley, Carnes, Martin, Phillips, Roberts, Rucker, Swope, Seipolt, Tarr, Weld, and Woodrum, calling Article 5 Convention, proposing term limits.
Under the rules of the Senate, the resolution will lie over 1 day. Motions. Petitions.
There are none.
Unfinished business.
There is none.
Bills on third reading.
Engrossed Senate Bill 16, providing continued eligibility for developmental disability services to dependents of military members. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill creates new code sections to provide developmental disability services to dependents of military service members. This bill essentially provides that should a dependent of a military service member who is eligible to receive developmental disability services through the state be forced to leave the state pursuant to the military service member's military assignment out of the state, that dependent would not be forced to start the process of applying for the same benefits anew upon his or her return to West Virginia. This bill, Mr. President, is an identical reintroduction of Senate Bill 114 from the 2020 regular session, which passed through this body 32-0. It made it out of House Veterans Affairs and Homeland Security, but unfortunately did not make it through the House Finance Committee. I urge passage of the bill. Happy to answer any questions.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Senator from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to stand briefly in support of this bill. This is an important benefit to our military service people who sacrifice so much getting sent around the country and the world in our defense. I would urge unanimous passage of this bill to send a message to the House to please get it out of their committees and not allow it to die another year. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Brooke wish to close? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine to ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting, more than a majority of those present and voting in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 53, providing person criminally responsible for another's death may not be involved in burial arrangements. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 53 creates one new section of the state code, and it addresses when a person is going to be precluded from participating in making funeral and burial arrangements for a deceased person. It's a very short section, would be designated as Section 12. It goes in Article 3, and it says that next of kin who've been charged in a criminal fashion with the death of a person are precluded from participating in or planning the funeral. The floor adopted an amendment on Friday offered by the senator from Randolph, I believe, that makes it clear that there is a way to petition the court to intervene and have that be reviewed. But otherwise, that explains what the entire bill does. Be happy to try to answer any questions. Otherwise, I urge the bill's passage.
Question is passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, question is, before the Senate, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. All those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, and 1 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative, I declare the bill passed. The clerk has a title amendment.
Senator Trump moved to amend the title of the bill.
Question is on adoption of the title amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the title amendment adopted. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 308, modifying requirement that racetrack participate in West Virginia Thoroughbred Development Fund by certain date. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senior Senator from the 4th. Senator. Excuse me. Senator from the 8th. Or excuse me, from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. Sorry for the confusion there. Senate Bill 308 would equalize the distribution of proceeds from excess lottery terminal income at the state's 2 horse racing facilities. The current law adversely affects distribution in Hancock County by not allowing distribution to municipalities, only the county. Jefferson County allows distribution to both the county and the municipalities where the state's other racetrack is. Passage of this bill does not impact non-horse racing facilities. Senate Bill 190, which was identical to this bill, passed the full Senate last session by a vote of 34-0, but unfortunately met its demise in the House of Delegates. I urge passage of the bill, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. All those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 31 yeas, 2 nays, 1 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 321, clarifying and updating language regarding Fairmont State alumni license plates. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. This bill merely makes technical corrections into the code, Section 17A 314, which covers special license plates, and updates them from the term college to university. It relates to the license plate for Fairmont State. That update just reflects a change in the status of the school, and since this plate was created by law, we have to change the law. I urge passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 338, creating Fire Service Equipment and Training Fund. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senior Senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 338 is a corrective bill that simply reinserts into code language that was inadvertently deleted during the 2020 session regarding the State Fire Marshal's Fire Service Equipment and Training Fund. That fund allows the Fire Marshal to make grants to volunteer and part volunteer fire departments. The bill makes no changes to provisions relating to the fund. I'll entertain questions, otherwise I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk has a title amendment.
Senator Maynard moved to amend the title of the bill.
Question is on adoption of the title amendment. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the title amendment adopted. The senior senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the bill be made effective from passage. And request unanimous consent that the roll call used on passage of the bill will be used to make it so effective.
Senior senator from the 17th moves that the bill may be made effective from passage and requests unanimous consent that the roll call used on the passage of the bill be used to make it so effective. Is there objection? Chair hears none. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent, and not voting, more than 2/3 of those elected to the Senate having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill effective from passage. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 358, removing prohibition on ATMs located in an area where racetrack video lottery machines are located. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 358, and very simply, as a current law precludes a racetrack from having an ATM in an area where the video lottery games are played. This removes that prohibition. I do urge passage of the bill. They currently do have ATM machines that are in the facilities. They just can't have them on the floor, and this just brings it up to standards that are competitive with our bordering states.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Senator from Greenbrier.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm going to stand in opposition to this bill today. Didn't know much about this until it hit the committee, and was just astounded that we were considering this bill. In committee, I asked the Lottery Commission if it did what I thought it did, that if the reason that this prohibition was in place in the first place against ATMs from being on the racetrack casino floors was put there in order to keep people from having really easy access to losing everything they had. And after a little bit of back and forth, the Lottery Commission agreed that that was essentially the reason it was put in place in 1994. Several members of this body served here in 1994 when that preclusion or prohibition was put into place, and I think they made the right decision. So, some might say the times have changed. The ATMs aren't far off the casino floors now, racetrack casino floors now anyway. What's the big deal? Well, I understand that they have been pretty creative in trying to get around this prohibition, but I'm not going to stand by and reward them for that sort of behavior by getting rid of a good policy because they found ways to skirt it. That's not right. I don't begrudge anyone from making a living and trying to do a little bit better, but I can't sit idly by while a bill moves forward that would make it easier to prey on people through less than moral means. Now, this is a little vote that hardly anybody outside of this room is ever going to know about or hear about again, but I think it represents a pretty clear choice. I'm going to vote no on this bill, and I would ask my colleagues to consider doing the same. Ecclesiastes 5:10 says, "For what does it profit a man to gain the whole world and forfeit his soul?" Thank you, Mr. President.
Further discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 18 yeas, 15 nays, and 1 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed Senate Bill 374, increasing threshold for bid requirement to $10,000 to be consistent with other state agencies. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. The senior senator from the 6th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Senate Bill 374 amends a single section of code and raises to $10,000 from $2,500 the threshold amount that requires the Division of Corrections and Rehabilitation to obtain 3 written bids before awarding a contract. The change would align the Division of Corrections with the spending thresholds for other state agencies. I'll entertain questions. Otherwise, I urge passage of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, and 1 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for Senate Bill 377 relating to extension for boil water advisories by water utility or public service district. Third reading of the bill.
Question is passage of the bill. Senator from Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. President. We passed this bill through the Senate, the House, and the governor signed it last year. It wasn't to go into effect until this summer of 21. What we did with this new bill this year was make 2 very small changes to the bill that we passed last year. So what this bill deals with is a public water system informing customers of boiled water advisories. So the bill this year extended the time frame. The deadline is now January 1st, 2022. And the bill also this year made a change that says the notification can be sent via text or voice alert mass notification system. Previously it said and. So I urge passage of this bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. All those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2012 relating to public charter schools. The bill was advanced to third reading with the right to amend.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senator Romano moved to amend the bill on page 9, section 5.
Senator from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I ask unanimous consent that I may explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? The chair hears none. Senator from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the body giving me the additional time to look at this amendment after Friday's debate. This is a simple amendment under Section B.
which simply makes it mandatory that the state board, the only change in the current language is the may to shall, that the state board shall promulgate a rule in accordance with 29A 3B1 to ensure the accountability of public charter schools meet the standard for student performance and other public students limited to 18-2E5. I recommend a passage of the amendment, Mr. President.
Is there discussion? Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition to this amendment. I do consider the amendment not necessary. We already allow it. It's true that it's not mandatory, but the State Board of Education has not asked us to make it mandatory, and they have gone ahead and written a rule for if there's the eventuality that there is charter schools. So already we are getting exactly what we want, which is to make certain that charter schools would be accountable under 18-2E5. I urge rejection of the amendment.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Harrison, wish to close?
Yes, Mr. President, thank you. Colleagues, I think what we learned on Friday is we don't know a lot about charter schools, and I think we're going to find more out about that today. But this is a simple rule change or simple language change that requires the state board to be involved in charter schools. There is no other accountability in this bill that ensures charter schools are educating our children. Remember, any 5-year contract has to reach its end before it can be revoked except under extraordinary circumstances. This simply provides our State Board of Education to have the same look-in that it has in all of our public schools to ensure our children are properly educated and the hundreds of millions of dollars that we're about to risk are being properly spent for that purpose. I urge passage of the amendment, Mr. President.
Question before the Senate is on adoption of the amendment offered by the Senator from Harrison. Roll call has been demanded. Is the demand sustained? The demand is sustained. Okay. The question before the Senate is the amendment offered by the Senator from Harrison. All those in favor will vote yea. All those opposed will vote nay. The clerk shall prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine to ascertain the results. On this question, there's 10 yeas, 23 nays, 1 absent and not voting. I declare the amendment rejected. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The clerk will read the bill a third time.
Engrossed committee substitute for House Bill 2012 relating to public charter schools. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I'm going to try to get this adjusted. House Bill 2012 increases the current charter school limits of 3 public charter schools up to July 1, 2023, and makes it 10. It requires the legislative auditor to conduct an audit of the public charter school program 2 years after the first public charter school commences operations and report the findings to Lucia. It makes changes to the process when 2 or more county boards act as an authorizer. It adds the West Virginia Professional Charter School Board as a charter school authorizer. It amends provisions pertaining to the charter contract. It limits revocation of a charter contract to when the authorizer determines that the health and safety of students is threatened, if an administrator employed by or a member of the governing board over the charter school is convicted of fraud or misappropriation of funds, if there is failure to meet generally accepted standards of financial management, there is a material breach of the charter contract, there is
Excuse me, Senator. Get the mic up a little closer.
Okay, sorry. There is a substantial violation of any provision of law from which the public charter school is not exempted, or there are dire and chronic academic deficiencies. All of these allow a charter contract to be revocated for these reasons. It allows a charter applicant or governing board to appeal a decision of an authorizer to the state board within 30 days of the authorizer's decision. requires the State Board to promulgate rules establishing the process and timeline for the appeals, and requires the State Board to remand the decision back to the authorizer under certain specified conditions. It allows the Professional Charter School Board to authorize 2 statewide virtual public charter schools and limits enrollment in a statewide virtual public charter school to no more than 5% of the headcount enrollment per year. It allows county boards to authorize virtual public charter schools for students in an identified primary recruitment area. It limits virtual public charter schools each county can authorize to no more than 1. It limits attendance to a virtual public charter school to students within the primary recruitment areas identified in the application. It prohibits an application from including within its primary recruitment area a location that's within the primary recruitment area of another virtual public charter school, and limits county public charter school enrollment to no more than 10% of a county's headcount enrollment. It sets forth numerous other requirements and parameters applicable to virtual public charter schools, and it creates the West Virginia Professional Charter School Board, sets forth the membership and other details about the board, and requires the board to investigate official complaints and allows the board to conduct audits. I urge passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? Senator from Mason.
Would the lady yield? Would the lady yield for a question?
Will the lady yield? Senator yields.
Is there anything in this bill that would allow for the local citizens to have a voice in whether or not a charter school is established in their district, either on a local referendum or just by some other means?
So there is nothing in here that allows for a referendum, although there is a requirement for a public hearing that has to occur if there is a charter applicant who would like to start a charter school. I will tell you that there have been others who have also talked about the possibility of a referendum, and I am very happy to discuss maybe the possibility of adding that at some point. I don't oppose the idea.
Thank you.
No problem.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Will the senator from Jefferson yield?
Does the senator yield? The senator yields.
Thank you, Senator. I just wanted to ask a couple questions and to make sure I wasn't under any mistaken beliefs during my questioning on Friday. Am I correct that this bill authorizes 2 charter schools, each one with a cap of 5%, making the total virtual charter schools could take up to 10% of our public school students?
That is correct. There is the possibility of up to 2 statewide virtuals with a cap of 5% each, which could, if both were to be approved and operating, could go all the way up to 10%.
That's around 26,000 students, is that right?
I do not know what the exact head count would be, but it is going to be limited to those caps.
Do you not think it's important to know how many students could possibly be taken out of public schools?
So these students aren't leaving the public school. A virtual public charter school would still be within the public school system.
Well, I understand we call it public, but just to be clear, the only thing that I understand, I've asked this question, maybe you can answer it a little better. The only thing that I've understood that made them public was that they're getting public taxpayer funds. Is there anything else that makes them public?
Yes, they are accountable to the state board. They have to follow the rules and requirements, both federal and state, that we mentioned is in 18.5G, 5E1, and also there are a lot of things that is exactly the same as public schools. Like, for example, they must accept all students who apply. They have to handle special needs students. So they're public schools, and there is the possibility of local counties adopting a virtual as an option for those students who would like to have that kind of style learning.
I'm sorry, I remember in the bill that it said the only governing body of a public charter school was its governing body. Isn't that correct? That's a provision in the bill?
A charter school, the way the public charter school works is they must have a governing body. There are criteria for those members of that governing body that they must be nonprofit, and they make an application for the charter school. The application is made to the authorizer. The authorizer and the applicant then negotiate all of the details of the charter school, including the teachers and their qualifications, how many students they can handle, and there's a whole list of criteria I'm happy to read if you would like, but it is negotiated between the authorizer or the charter school, and that's how it's managed.
And just to be clear, the authorizer is not necessarily, it could be the State Board of Education, but it's actually, it could also be, and more likely is going to be, a board appointed by whoever the governor is at the time, called the Public Charter School Board, right, or whatever it's called, I can't remember.
So that is a possibility, but it's also possible that it be a county school board.
Well, they haven't had any approved yet, so that's more likely it's going to be on the other one. If I could just ask you a couple more questions, Senator. I've had a hard time pinning down how much money these entities are going to get per student. In 19 to 20 school year, the state share was about $6,400. In 2021, it was about $6,436. So they're going to get 90% of that figure. Is that correct?
That's correct, but they also, public charter schools, just like public schools, can also receive federal funds to educate the students with disability or special needs.
Right, and they're also going to get the students, the public school students' share of federal funds, which are around $1,800 in 2021. Do you agree with that?
Actually, that changes per county. I believe it's based on enrollment of students.
But that's about a close average. Would you agree with that? Do you think it's more?
I would not be able to tell you if it's the average. I'm sorry.
Well, how much money do you think the charter schools are going to get per student, per public school student that they draw off out of the current public schools?
So it is an average of 90%, and that number again can change. So I'm not able to tell you a specific number.
Again, I think it's important that we know, though, don't you, to know how much money is coming out of the public schools?
Well, I do want to point out that they do not receive any of the county share. So actually the money is going to be very different based on where the charter school were to open, and it could actually come out to about 60% of what a public school is funded at, depending on where they are.
Well, it could. But it also could be 90% of the monies that are going to a particular county's public school if that student goes to a charter school in that county.
90% of the state average.
And the feds. The Fed money goes with them too, right?
And the federal money goes to help educate the special education students.
Okay, and we don't have any idea or have provided any estimates to the public school system to let them know what that amount is going to be or what they ought to be prepared for.
Well, I will point out that the process to get a charter school running could take us as much as a year. There is a lot of due process, there's public hearings, there's negotiations back and forth. There are some, deadlines, like you have to reply within a certain amount of time. But clearly, there is plenty of time for the public and the county to know and understand what the impact would be.
You do agree then with the approximate number, and I understand it's got some variations, but approximately $7,400 per student is going to go from the public school system to the charter school system if they go to the charter school.
I just can't tell you that that's the average. I'm sorry. I did not look at every 55 counties and what they get from the state.
I just think that's such an important number for our schools to know. But surely, I just want to make sure of this. We have no mechanism to backfill that funding to the public school system.
So all of the funding is public school. So we are talking about two public schools. Just like there can be a new public school that we open up in a county, a public charter school is another public school. The money is still staying within the public school system, and it's still educating are students who are enrolled in public education. And it is, of course, my hope and my expectation that if we were to start a public charter school, that it would only happen when the community is asking for something like that. And it might actually draw in students who are currently not enrolled in public school, would actually increase the enrollment number in that county, and that county will not only benefit from increased enrollment, but the public charter school, 10% of that funding stays in the county, and they can use it to educate the students who are in the traditional public school system, and will actually have more money that they can spread. So actually, this is a really exciting opportunity that I'm looking forward to seeing happen hopefully one day in West Virginia.
And certainly we hope something like that will happen, but there's no guarantee any of that will happen, right?
Nope, because it's based on whether the community wants it.
Okay, and let me just ask you then again, is there any mechanism to, and I understand you call them public charter schools, the money's coming out, from my perspective, out of the county public school systems and going to the charter schools, which in many cases will be run by education service providers that are for-profit. But we can call them both public schools, but I see it as two different systems. It's coming out, and I'll call it the traditional public school system.
Are you asking me a question, or are you
Yeah, I'm getting to the question.
Okay.
Again, my question is there any mechanism to backfill the lost taxpayer funds to the traditional public schools once the student leaves?
So I want to point out to the senator that students can leave the public schools now. We have students that are leaving the public school right now. And no, we don't have a backfill for those students who are exiting the public school system because they're not getting the education that they want or that the parents feel the student needs. So when a student decides to join a public charter school, if one were to get started, the money gets transferred, but it doesn't leave the public school system and still stays within the public education. And yes, that 10% that the county gets to receive is to help that county. You know, they're going to lose that student, but they're going to be keeping money for a student that they no longer have to serve, and that money is going to help them with the students that are left in the traditional system. And that is the funding mechanism that we have established, and of course it is a policy decision.
But the 90% leaves and does not get backfilled.
The 90% helps to educate that West Virginia public school student who decided to join a public charter school.
And I understand that completely. I just want to be clear. The 90% that is leaving the traditional public school system has left. There's no backfilling of that. It's out of the traditional public school system.
I think I've answered that.
I don't, perhaps, I'm not hearing you clearly. Let me ask you, and again, since we don't know whether, you know, we'll just stick with virtual charter schools. We don't know whether, you know, 1% or the entire 10% is going to go to virtual public schools, charter schools. What happens to our sports programs? I mean, those kids who go to virtual charter school and even the brick and mortar charter schools, they don't get to play sports in their old high schools or middle schools or grade schools, do they?
So that actually was in the existing language from 2 years ago that we passed, and yes, they are public school students and they get to participate in the extracurriculars. They can form their own, or they can join the school that they would have attended if they had not switched to the public charter school.
Where is that part of the law? Are you talking about the Tebow bill?
No, I'm not talking about Tebow bill. In here, we talked about how a public charter school is a public school, and therefore those enrolled students get to participate in extracurricular activities just like all public school students.
So if let's use the brick and mortar example. If somebody forms a brick and mortar charter school and peels off, you know, 10% of the high school population in Harrison County, where I'm from, those kids can go back, those students can go back and play sports in their old high schools?
They can try out unless that public charter school decides to establish their own team.
So if the charter school establishes their own team, they cannot go back?
Well, they'll be able to participate within their own public charter school, but if there isn't, they can participate at the school where they would have attended if they had, enrolled. So it would have to be within their line, the district lines.
And can you point out, and I just want to be clear, so if the charter school has a team, football team, then the kids have to play on that football team. If they don't have a football team and they came out of
I have to
Bridgeport High School.
admit that I'm not going to be able to find that language immediately, but I'm happy to look for it and point it out to you later.
Because I looked through the bill, I didn't see it anywhere. I mean, I don't see that provision anywhere in the bill.
Well, it might be delineated in the rules that the state board also had to promulgate. But I'm happy to look for the language where it says that they're public schools and students, so therefore they can participate in extracurriculars as public students.
But just to be clear, because, we're in the public, before the public, you believe there's a provision in the bill that allows students at a charter school to go back and play for their old traditional public school if there's not such a team at the charter school?
I believe so, yes.
Anybody? Just one more question. Is there any funding mechanism that goes back for those students? I'll let you.
I'm sorry.
Can you? I see you got counsel there. Could we ask counsel if they could point it out?
I'm sure he's looking for it.
No, that's a no.
I said he's looking for it.
Oh, okay, he's looking for it. While he's looking for it, is there any funding that is returned for those students that would choose to go back to their old traditional public school to play sports, even though they're enrolled in a public charter?
Well, the funding for extracurriculars is usually done through fundraising and participation of the students in the extracurriculars, so I think it would be the same in that circumstance.
So there would be no money returned to the school where they went back to play sports?
So the state does not fund extracurriculars.
If I could get an answer to that, I just have a couple more questions while he's looking. What if, with the loss of funds to the traditional public school, there's also a loss of personnel? Would you agree?
Again, we fund the schools with using a funding formula that, yes, that money is taken into account personnel.
And I got this little handy-dandy computer program, and I just used 26,000. That cuts it down the middle. That's if 50% of the brick and mortar schools were populated with their maximum, and 50% of the virtual charter schools were populated with their maximums. The Department of Education believes that would be a loss of 3,190 positions, 1,890 of them being teacher positions, 1,200 of them being service personnel positions, and I'm rounding here, and then they got a category of professional student support, which would be about 130 positions. Does that sound right to you?
Sorry, I could not follow all those numbers, but I will tell you that clearly if students are choosing an alternative to the traditional school that they are right now enrolled in and choosing any other alternative, yes, it's going to mean a loss of funding because of that loss in enrollment. That can happen right now through folks who leave the public school system to go to private school, to homeschool, to move to another state, and move to another county. This is no different. So students and families who are choosing to find a better education or a different form of education or an alternative, it's up to them to choose. And no loss of enrollment is going to happen if the student is satisfied and happy with the traditional public school that they're attending.
Sure, they could move out of state too. That would lose the funding for them too.
Of course.
Yes. Do we have an answer, Senator?
He still hasn't found it. Sorry, Senator.
Great. He's going to let us know.
I'm trying to look, yes, I'm trying to look as you're asking me questions.
Yeah, that was the last question I had. If he's located it, maybe he could point it out to us.
Okay, thank you. We will.
Oh, he's not found it yet. I'm sorry, I thought you said he found it.
No, he has not found it yet.
Okay, very good, very good. Well, thank you, Senator, for being so cooperative.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Harrison.
Thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, I was wrong on Friday. The calculations and the numbers I discussed with the body used the wrong percentage. I used 5% for virtual charter schools. It's 10%. 2 schools, 5% each. It's not 13,250 potential students at $98 million a year. It's 26,500 potential students at a total of $196 million a year. Now, I want you to think about that for a second. That's virtual students only. That doesn't include brick and mortar, so-called public charter schools. That could be, if they fulfilled their 10%, that could be another 26,500, or nearly $400 million a year. But the virtual charter schools cause me the most concern. And here's why. We're going to hand $7,400 per student to the brick and mortar charter schools. We're going to hand $7,400 per student to the virtual charter schools. Now, virtual charter schools don't have any buildings. They don't have any desks. They don't have any lockers. They don't have any cooks. They don't have any janitors. They don't have any security. They don't have any liability protection. They have teachers, but in vastly smaller numbers. As I said on Friday, Florida has 1 teacher, 1 instructor, per 274 students. That's not very many for even if the full 26,500 students went to virtual charter schools. At the maximum, 6,500. If the entire 20% would leave the system, 6,500 positions would be lost in our traditional public schools. If we look at half and we say, okay, between brick and mortar charter schools and virtual charter schools, only 26,500 students will be lost out of the system. That's $200 million a year and over 3,000 positions. But let's not even assume there's going to be that many. Let's assume it's just 10,000. 10,000 students. That's 1,234 traditional public school positions, according to the Department of Education. That's 1,234 public school teachers. That's 727, that's 1,234 public school positions, 727 educators, 456 service personnel, and 50 professional student support personnel. Why are we taking these risks with so many unknowns? Why are we taking these risks when we've never had a charter school and now we're going to have some? Why not put some reasonable limits on these virtual and brick and mortar charter schools? I mean, you look around the country, charter school results are mixed at best. Sure, there's some successes, but there's a whole lot of failures. You've heard me say here dozens of times, Ohio lost $4 billion. Nobody stood up to refute that. Nobody stood up and said, oh, wait a minute, they didn't lose $4 billion. You know why? Because they lost $4 billion. Through theft, through mismanagement, through lack of proper education of children, they've gone out of business. Poor facilities where the desks fall through the floor because the floorboards are so poor and so in disrepair, and because of discrimination. And the governing body for every virtual school, according to this bill, is itself. Why are we doing that? Innovation? Why don't we take the handcuffs off the public schools, if that's our concern? Public charters are only public for the purpose of getting our public taxpayer dollars and putting them in someone's pocket. Sure, they say they're not for profit,
but there will be for-profit companies running these charters. And for-profit companies are worried about one thing, and it's okay when it's not our education of our kids. They're worried about the profit. Education service providers abound. There's two major players in the virtual charter schools, and you're going to get both of them in there. They're each going to be able to take 5% of our students. But I want somebody to answer, and nobody can answer this, is why do they need the same amount of money per student that our brick and mortar charter schools are going to need? Where is that extra money going to go? Just assume that they're taking the $200 million. If you assume that there's going to be one instructor for every 100 students, that's about $27 million in educational cost. That's $173 million they have to spend after they pay the teachers. Where is that money going? I don't know. I would venture to say nobody else knows either. Regardless of the party we belong to, our obligation is to be stewards of the taxpayers' money. Our constitutional obligation is to educate our children in a thorough and efficient manner. We're abdicating that with this bill. We were elected to do the right thing regardless of the party we come from, regardless of who tells us something's good and bad or bad. It's our obligation to figure out whether it's good or bad. Now, how are we going to explain if this thing goes south? Might be the greatest thing since sliced bread. But we don't know that because nobody can answer those questions. We're just going to put the money in their hands and see if it turns out okay. Sports is going to take a hit. That seems to be the most important thing in our state sometimes. But imagine 10% of your county high schools heading off to a charter school that have their own football team. There are not going to be any football teams at the rest of those high schools that's any worthwhile. The traditions will be lost. The parents will be in an uproar of those that are left behind. You can't play for your own high school. I'm not sure, at least I haven't heard yet from council, whether you can even play back at your old school if you go to a charter school. There will be less money for facilities, less money for uniforms, less coaches, less money for travel. How are you going to respond to your constituents, Mr. President, when they ask you what happened to that money? No one knows exactly what's going to happen. If it goes bad, how will we respond? Now, a no vote on this bill will allow us to do something. It'll allow us to go back and recraft this bill with some proper limitations. I understand that the majority wants charter schools. I understand you're going to get them. I understand we've got an alternative certification body that's going to certify charter schools even though the county school boards and the state school boards refused. We're going to get charter schools. But let's do it in a common sense fashion. Let's fix this bill before it ends in a bad story that West Virginia can't recover from. We can't afford $4 billion. We can't afford $500 million. Mr. President, I strongly recommend a no vote on this bill.
Is there further discussion? Senator from Ohio.
Thank you, Mr. President. I want to talk for a moment about student achievement and how it relates to this bill that we're debating here today. When we debated education bills in the past, Senate Bill 451, the omnibus bill, we heard a lot of discussion about the fact that West Virginia students ranked low in key categories, whether that was SAT scores or math scores or English scores or any other number of metrics, that we weren't scoring as high as we should. And I can't dispute that. I wish we were higher in those categories as well. And we all have high achievers in our counties and we have low achievers in our counties. We have some brilliant young people that graduate from high school every year in West Virginia that become national merit finalists. They go on to Ivy League schools. They get scholarships to pay for everything. But there are plenty of students who don't do that well. And there are schools in our state
where there are predominantly low scores that we see, where they don't have the top teachers, where they don't have enough teachers. And they're easy to identify. I could tell you right now the schools in my county that don't score as high. I don't have to see the data, I just know. Clayton Birch could get on his computer right now, and with a couple clicks of a mouse, he would know the top 10 lowest performing schools in the state. It's not hard to identify those schools. And they're typically schools where the children are economically disadvantaged, and they're typically homes without internet service. They're typically homes where there's only one parent or there aren't any parents. Let me contrast that with a personal story. So last year at the height of COVID, when my son, who's in high school, couldn't go to school, when he couldn't work at the place where he used to work, which was a part-time job because they didn't need extra help, when he couldn't go to camp, his mom and I said, you're going to take an SAT prep course. And so we signed him up, and it was on the internet, but it was a live course, and he had a live teacher, and there were other students from around the country helping him to do better on that test. And the reason we were able to do that is because he had two parents who pushed him to do it. We could afford to pay for the course, and we had internet service. There are a lot of homes in this state that don't have any of those things. These students don't have those opportunities to take a course like that. And his scores went up a little bit. They need to go up a little bit more, but they went up a little bit because he had that opportunity. And so if we're going to really help those who are pulling down our averages, we need to make sure that we reach out to them. And we're getting ready to invest potentially hundreds of millions of dollars in this new education package that we're about to vote upon. And we have this opportunity to bring those scores up. How do you bring the scores up? You find those who are struggling the most, who have the least opportunity, and you reach out to them. They're the ones who are pulling us down, not because they want to, but because they don't have the opportunities that other kids have. And if you were to identify those schools, identify those counties, give them those additional academic opportunities, then you'd be able to look over at us and say, you see what? We told you so. We were right about charter schools all along. Look at these test scores. They're going up. You see, Mr. Senator from Harrison County, we were right. I told you so. The scores have gone up. Charter schools work. There's just this incredible opportunity right in front of us to do that when we're about to invest all this money. But the other day, my friend from Greenbrier stood up and he made an amendment to make sure that we had at least 3 of these that targeted underachieving schools or underachieving districts. And it was voted down. Overwhelmingly, it was voted down. So I think if we're serious about achievement, Mr. President, we need to help those who need it the most. We need to help the children who don't have the opportunities that everybody else has. We were told that that wasn't a good amendment that was offered by the senator from Greenbrier because it would affect local control. And I see it less about local control, and I see it more about control by these charter school profiteers that the senator from Harrison mentioned. These are for-profit enterprises, and there will be less profit for charter school operators if they have to go to these forgotten places where it's harder to recruit teachers, where there's not internet service. It's going to be harder for those schools to profit if they're forced to go to those locations. And that's what I'm afraid this is about. Because the fundamental principle with charter schools is that someone expects to make a profit, and the less money they spend on educating students, the more money that goes into their pockets, and the better their bottom line looks. The more restrictions we put in this, the harder it makes for them to make money. Mr. President, it seems like we are letting profit get in the way of student performance, and that's why I will be a no vote on this bill. Thank you.
Is there further discussion? Junior Senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in opposition to the bill HB 2012 for 2 reasons, generally and specifically: the lack of local control and the lack of fiscal responsibility. Let's talk a moment about local control. The senator from Mason County asked a question a few minutes ago about what about the need or possibility of a referendum in the county to determine whether or not there should be a charter school in that county, whether it be brick and mortar or virtual. And the response was, well, that's a good idea. We'll have to come back to that. Well, here we are debating a bill that's only gone through one committee, the Education Committee, has bypassed the Finance Committee. This would be the opportunity to discuss the possibility of a referendum of the people of that county to determine whether or not they should support a public charter school, either virtual or brick and mortar. What this bill, though, seeks to do is to add another layer of government called the West Virginia Professional Charter School Board that will be empowered to authorize a charter school potentially over the objection of the County Board of Education. Let that sink in a moment. The folks who've been elected to make decisions about education in their respective counties can be overrun and overwhelmed. Their objection likely has nothing to do with the merit of a charter school, but probably has more to do about whether or not there's a sufficient student population to support another school. They're the ones that have to run and that usually have to raise excess levies in order to support those students. What this bill basically says to our county boards of education is, you don't know what you're doing, we're going to step on you, and we're going to put a school in if we believe it should be done. Again, where are my conservatives in the state of West Virginia? That argument should be made by a Democrat, yet that's what we're here talking about. The second aspect is fiscal responsibility. No one has rebutted the statements made by the senator from Harrison as far as the fiscal impact. I've not yet heard a good argument why his amendment in committee, which was passed in committee, was wrenched out of the bill. It was a reasonable step. That's what our people expect us to do. There may be disagreement on whether or not charter schools are the way to go for West Virginia, but at the very least, there was some reason and tapping the brakes and saying, okay, we're going to go down this road. Let's make sure it's the right one for West Virginia. Again, going to fiscal responsibility, as I understand it, this bill has no fiscal note. Yet when we were here 2 years ago debating the omnibus bill, I didn't go through Finance Committee, but at least it had a fiscal note of $130 million. At least we knew what we were talking about. At least we could actually answer the questions of reporters who reasonably have questions as to how much this is going to cost for West Virginia. I just heard that the virtual schools may cost as much as $200 million. $200 million of our people's money going not into a West Virginia corporation, at the very least that would be nice, but likely will go into an out-of-state corporation, a for-profit ESP, that will benefit those entities, but it will be another example of West Virginia's long history of public dollars going out of our state. Why do we keep making this mistake? It's not the right way to go. I've lost the argument on charter schools, and it's something I'm going to have to face, obviously, because I disagree with it. But at the very least, at least right now, if a county wants a charter school, they can make that decision. Let them make the decision. They're better prepared than we are. They know the ins and outs of their counties, the characteristics. I'm a no vote on this bill, Mr. President. Thank you.
Is there further discussion before I recognize the Senator from Jefferson to close? Senator from Jefferson.
Thank you, Thank you, Mr. President. These masks just make it a little bit tricky. So there's been a lot of concerns raised, and I appreciate those concerns. It is specifically because of the over 20 years of history since charter schools were first begun in the United States that I took the time with others. I didn't do it by myself, doing research, looking into what are the best plans. What are the recommendations? How can we avoid the mistakes, the problems? There were charter schools that fell into disrepair, couldn't function, closed. That's one of the differences between a charter, a public charter, and a public school. When a public school is not making ends meet, or there's problems or mismanagement, it just continues. We just keep funding it. Sometimes we might let somebody go and hire a new administrator to oversee it. When a public charter school has mismanagement, doesn't show student achievement, doesn't perform, it closes. So there are those that have closed. Fortunately for us, we have 46 other states who have adopted public charter schools and have over 20 years of experience, and we can learn from their experience. And what is their experience? I will tell you, traditional schools have not suffered because of a public charter school that has opened, either within the vicinity or even within the public school. There are public schools that have public charters within the public school building, and they have some of their own courses, some of their own specializations, but they're right next door to their classmates, participating in all the extracurriculars and adding to the enriched environment of that public traditional school. So I will just address some of these concerns that are being raised. When it comes to the cost of the virtual, I will tell you again that all the public charter schools are receiving 90% of the state average, none of the local funding, and they receive some of the federal funding based on the population. It's not even based on enrollment, it's based on the population of the county. That's how the feds determine how much money to send for these schools. Those virtuals, as my fellow senator pointed out, might not have to heat a building or many, different classrooms, don't have to worry about the desks, but they do have to worry about the technology. They do have to make certain that their students have what they need in order to be able to go online. In addition to that, they do have buildings. They do have teachers teaching these classes. They still have all of the benefits that an employee gets. They still have all of those costs, and that actually, in committee, we learned is about 80% of the cost just goes towards the educators and staff. I will tell you that it is specifically because of the funding concerns that we put in this improved bill, this amended bill that we are voting on today, that after 2 years of operation, there will be an audit, and we will get the data of how much it costs. We will find out. And at that moment when we have the data, that's the time when we discuss, hey, maybe we need to adjust the funding. That's when we do it, at that point, when we have numbers. I will tell you that in looking at other states, they are funding the virtual online charters like we are doing today, and they're offering a great option for those families who prefer that option. That's the point. Let the families choose what works best for them. And these public charter schools have very high accountability measures that they must meet, and if they don't, they will close. Another point that was made, what happens if things go south? What happens if it's a failure, right? So we try this great experiment. We attempt to do what our country was founded on, right? It was founded on trying something new, going somewhere where no one else has gone, pioneering that spirit. Sometimes things go wrong. Sometimes it doesn't go the way you expect, and you learn from it. One of the goals that we established when we voted on charter schools 2 years ago, several have pointed out, was the opportunity, Mr. President, sorry, things are slipping, the opportunity going to the very front of the bill, to improve student learning by creating more diverse public schools with high standards, allow innovative education methods, practices, and programs that engage students and parents, enable students, or schools, to establish a distinctive school curriculum, a specialized academic or technical theme, or a method of education, provide expanded opportunities within the public schools for parents to choose. Choice. You know, it's funny that that has become something that some oppose, making a choice, because I have to tell you, when folks ask me, you know, why do you defend charter schools so much? Why do you keep pushing for this? You know, I, as a parent, had to make a choice of what is best for my kids. I had to make the very difficult choice of sacrificing my career to stay home and provide what I thought my kids needed, right? Not everyone has that choice, Mr. President. Not everyone can have a parent who can stay home, as was pointed out. Not everyone even has two parents. There's a lot of kids in West Virginia that are not even being raised by their parents, something that we've dealt with a lot in the last 2 years with foster care reform and issues. The point of providing choice is that you are empowering those families, whatever makeup they may be, to have a choice, to improve their kids' lives, to change where they're at. And charter schools have been found to especially help those minorities, low income, and single families. As a matter of fact, there's been 34 empirical studies done on the effect of public charter schools, and in 32 of those studies, the greatest achievement, the biggest difference in educational standards and outcomes was exactly in that population. You know, to me, that's worth trying. That is worth aiming for. I do want to point out to the senator from Harrison, we did finally find the language when it comes to school extracurricular activities, and the reason we couldn't find it, it's an existing language from the bill we passed 2 years ago, and we're happy to show him this afterwards, but it's in 18.5G7, and it's actually in a couple places, but in 18.5G7, subsection 4, it says, they can participate in co-curricular activities to the same extent as non-charter public schools. They can participate in extracurricular activities to the same extent as non-charter public schools. There is also provisions in the bill that says that the state board is to promulgate rules to make sure that this happens, so they can, you know, take into account any unforeseen issues we, you know, couldn't put into a state code. And there was also another section in 18.5G5, I think, 18.5G3, regarding the extracurriculars. And again, I'm happy to show that to the senator at the end of the floor session. Mr. President, we've had a lot of talk and a lot of questions raised. I hope I have answered most of them. I've tried. I will tell you that when it comes to providing a good quality education for our students, I will try whatever I can to help that student, that family. I do not want anyone in West Virginia to feel that they cannot improve their life and their future. And I know that education is the key. And that is the reason for why I urge adoption of this bill. Thank you, Mr. President.
Question before the Senate, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 19 yeas, 14 nays, 1 absent, not voting. More than a majority of those present having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk has the title amendment.
Committee on Education moved to amend the title.
Senator from Jefferson.
Mr. President, I urge unanimous consent to withdraw the Education Committee's title amendment.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Clerk has another title amendment.
Senator Rucker moved to amend the title of the bill.
Question is on adoption of the title amendment. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the title amendment adopted. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House.
Engrossed House Bill 2262 relating to the Controlled Substance Monitoring Database. Third reading of the bill.
Question is on passage of the bill. Senator from Marshall.
Thank you, Mr. President. The purpose of this bill is to change who reports and reviews Controlled Substance Monitoring Database. The bill removes the requirement that veterinarians need to check the database. It requires pharmacists to check the database when dispensing Schedule II controlled substances or any benzodiazepines to a patient who is not suffering from a terminal illness, and at least annually check the database thereafter should the practitioner continue to treat the patient. It removes language related to the veterinary board promulgating rules, since these rules would no longer be necessary as veterinarians are removed from the database. Mr. President, this bill was passed by the Senate last year and by the House last year, and had a technical flaw that was, the bill was vetoed, and it's back this year. It's already passed the House, of course. I urge passage.
Question is on passage of the bill. Is there discussion? If not, the question before the Senate is, shall the bill pass? All those in favor will vote yea. Those opposed will vote nay. The clerk will prepare the machine. Has every member voted? Has every member voted? If so, the clerk will close the machine and ascertain the results. On this question, 33 yeas, 0 nays, 1 absent and not voting. More than a majority of those present and voting having voted in the affirmative. I declare the bill passed. The clerk will communicate the action of the Senate to the House. Bills on second reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 5 relating to claims arising out of West Virginia Consumer Credit and Protection Act. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 160 authorizing Department of Revenue to promulgate legislative rules. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 248 requiring DHHR collaborate with Workforce Development Board and West Virginia Division of Personnel for purposes of job placement. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 311 relating to acquisition and disposition of property by Urban Development Authority. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Bill 359 informing landowners when fencing that may contain livestock is damaged due to accident. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 368 authorizing DEP to develop reclamation of abandoned and dilapidated properties program. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 389 relating to State Resiliency Office responsibility to plan for emergency and disaster response, recovery, and resiliency. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
Yes, sir. Senators Jeffries and Swope move to amend the bill on page 2, section 2.
Senior Senator from the 8th.
Mr. President, I request unanimous consent to explain the amendment in lieu of having it read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. Senator from the 8th.
Thank you, Mr. President. The SRO office is a very important office. There is a number of things that this agency does. It's a fairly new office. It is there to help coordinate government agencies and first responders, emergency disaster plans, responses, recoveries, resiliency planning, and more importantly about mitigation activities. But the most important thing at the end of it is there to be able to help rebuild our communities, make our communities stronger. Mr. President, we had this bill in government organization, made some changes in it, but there was one thing that kind of slipped past us, and And I thank you for laying this thing over so we could make some of the changes on here. But being consistent with other nonpartisan agencies, there's always been a member from the Senate and the House from each political party. So on page 2, section 2, line 21, after the word Senate, we'd be inserting the words one from each party. And on page 2, section 2, line 23, after the word delegates, we'd be inserting the words one from each party. Thank you, Mr. President.
Is there discussion? If not, the question for the Senate is adoption of the amendment offered by the senior senator from the 8th and the senator from Mercer. All those in favor will say aye. All those opposed say no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the amendment adopted. Are there further amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Committee substitute for Senate Bill 392, creating penalty for impersonating law enforcement officer or official. Second reading of the bill.
Are there amendments to the bill?
No, sir.
The bill will be engrossed and advanced to third reading.
Senate Joint Resolution 4, Incorporation of Churches or Religious Denominations Amendment. Second reading of the resolution.
Are there amendments to the resolution?
No, sir.
The resolution will be engrossed and advanced to third reading. Bills on first reading. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that all bills on first reading be considered read a first time and advanced to second read.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Introduction of guest. Remarks by members. Senator from Raleigh.
Thank you, Mr. President. I wanted to stand and remind this Senate body that we have a lot of people that are dealing with flood issues today, and we want to remember them in prayer. One of our members, Bug Stover, is not here today. As a result of that, he was in an accident this morning, but besides that, he also has been having some heart difficulties, and I think probably is at the hospital right now. And so if you would remember him in prayer, that would be very much appreciated. Thank you, sir.
Further remarks by members. Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Members, I would, you're going to have a piece of paper coming around to you that is the snapshot for the general revenue for year to date. And just an update on that, for February, we have a $34 million surplus. That is a year-to-date estimate that, or exceeds the year-to-date estimate by $208,858. The personal income tax collections, the performance actually exceeds the estimate in February by $98,010,813. Severance tax is down by about $8,929,007. And the other thing that I would just point out is on our rainy day funds. Year over year, we are now at a total between our rainy day A and rainy day B of $929,920,260. Thank you.
Further remarks by members. Senior Senator from the 16th.
Thank you, Mr. President. For some time, I've been really trying to grapple with the polarization of our country and how it's come to West Virginia, and particularly his body. And instead of trying to fight against someone else's ideas, I've been really trying to contemplate and understand where folks are coming from. I've had conversations with a number of folks, even of different parties, to just try to understand this polarization. And the idea of how we could be at odds even though our values are very similar. Now, we may think that our values are different, and in some ways we try to demonize the other person or the other side, saying our values are different. And therefore they're wrong, or they're trying to take West Virginia or America in the wrong direction, and we're going to fight against that. And we use the language of war quite a bit. We're going to battle. We're going to fight. Matter of fact, when I came through this morning, someone said, do you have your helmet on and shield? it kind of struck me that I need a helmet and a shield to come into a body of deliberation and democracy. But I just want to point out something to the body of some things that I continue to try to discover for myself. And by no means is this a criticism to anybody at all, because my mother would always tell me when you're pointing a finger at one person, you got 3 fingers pointing back at yourself. So I'm trying to understand why sometimes I feel like I'm a stranger in my homeland. This case, I just want to point one example just for thought. May not change anybody's mind, but please just think about this as far as an idea. So we just passed the charter schools, and I've heard the debate. It was good on both sides. A lot of information was given and a lot of arguments. And in the case of this thing, I don't see us too far apart as far as our value. All sides feel it's valuable for our children to have the best education, quality education. And so we're trying to do things to do that, to provide the environment for it. I believe all sides are working in that direction. So the values are very similar. But I want to give us something to think about, Mr. President, in how maybe we approach it. That things are kind of different in today than what it used to be. I've had the opportunity to read a number of books, but earlier on, about 30 years ago, there was a book by Robert Putnam called Bowling Alone. Robert Putnam is a Malkin Research Professor of Public Policy at Harvard. He's a member of the National Academy of Science, fellow of the British Academy. And he studied quite this, and this is quite a dated book, but it kind of tells, it predicted something 30 years ago that actually we see today. In the book of Bowling Alone, he says that Alexis de Tocqueville in Democracy in America wrote right after the Revolution what made America great. And what he observed in America that didn't happen in other European countries was the fact that people came together to help each other. You know, these small communities, people would come together and help each other. And he called that social capital. That is the capital where people do things for each other out of community, out of a social contract, out of the fact that we come together as community, common unity to work together. He said that's what made America great, that people came together. But in the book, 30 years ago, he said something is happening in the trends. I mean, the research was showing that people are no longer coming together. Maybe it was the idea of the automobile, where people could just travel and not even know their neighbor. They don't even have to walk down the sidewalk to know their neighbor. They just get in the car, they leave, they come back at night. He talked about gated communities, how people are gated together. And he even mentioned about technology, of how we can basically go through the day and not even have an opposing view of what we already think. We don't even have to interact with people. He used bowling alone because he said back then there used to be bowling leagues. People used to come together and bowl. But he's seeing a trend where people are just doing it alone. I mean, we see this in memberships, like civic groups are down, church attendance down. We don't come together very often. As a matter of fact, with this pandemic, we're even more socially isolated than what we were before. So taking that, he wrote another book several years ago, and I would really encourage you to read it. You may disagree with it, but at least try to expose yourself to some other, maybe some thoughts or approaches to it. And in this book, it was called Our Kids. Our Kids. Talking about the country and our kids. And it was interesting, he said that when he was growing up in the 60s in a small town of Ohio, people would say, let's do something for our kids. And what that meant when they said that is all the children of the community. Let's do it for our kids. Let's build this park. Let's build this school. Let's do this activity for our kids. He said, but today, when someone says they're going to do something for our kids, they mean their children alone. We're going to do something for our kids, my kids. And it's interesting, in the discussion, it was talked about choice. And what's best for my kids is what the Senator from Jefferson said. And I agree. I think every parent and every guardian ought to do what's best for their children. The one thing we forget is we don't live on an island by ourselves. So what we do best for our children is great. But if we forget about the other children, or they got to fend for themselves, that creates an environment with what type of community will our children, my children, grow up into. It starts isolating us, separating us. And in this whole thing of the debate going back and forth with these various educational things, there's more and more of a tendency today to do things for my kids. Give me choice. And I don't disagree with that. But on the other side, it's also one of those, yeah, but what about the communal aspect of it? How does it impact us overall? And the only thing I would ask, Mr. President, when we start talking about, providing choice and doing all this argument on education and other aspects as we go forward, I would ask that we look at it in the context of, yes, the individual, but let's look at the context of what made America great back when we first came together as a country, and that's when people came together and did things as community. What's good for me ought to be also good for you, Mr. President. And if it's only good for me and not for you, there's a net loss. And if we always have that, we will end up coming to a point when all we're going to do is just have individuals and tribes, and we're not going to be a community. We're not going to be a state. We're not going to be a country where we come together. And the only thing I'd ask is, as we look at policies, let's get the balance, because we want to try to get that balance of that social capital. Because without social capital, we see the manifestation of all the problems we got right now through the drug addiction, through increase of crime, through poverty, through all these things we're trying to deal with. That's because people are no longer moving in the direction of helping each other unless they can get something for themselves. So, Mr. President, it's interesting as I explore this and I continue to try to understand all sides in this debate, I'm finding that we're not necessarily varying in our values. It's just our approaches and maybe the consequences we all have as we approach it. Are we really going to get to that value where we want to have the best education? And the best education for our children and the best policies for everyone involved is when the majority of people benefit and we come together as a state. We need it more than ever to be united. We need to be more than ever to be united because we are not each other's enemies. We may be adversaries on policies, but we're not our enemies. Trust me, there's plenty of enemies outside that want to see our demise. And as long as they can divide us, they make us weak, because even Abraham Lincoln said a house divided will not stand. And so as we go forward, Mr. President, I hope we keep this in mind, and I know I will try to. Thank you.
Further remarks, Senator from Brooke.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate the senior senator from the 16th's remarks and his metaphor of going to war or battle. I've talked before that I spent almost about a year in Afghanistan where I was deployed. And at no point in time, Mr. President, did I hear my door's always open, or stop by any time, we can discuss. But those are things that I hear around here on a daily basis. You know, I ran for the Senate in 2016 because I was a member of the House, and I thought the House was a little too polarized. I thought that it was too partisan over there, and that's not to knock the House, it's just by nature of the beast, that's how it is. It's 100 people. And so I ran for the Senate to get away from that. I don't like the conflict and the confrontation all the time. And I was very surprised to find out that what I thought about the Senate was what the Senate actually is, that it's the upper chamber. It's where ideas come together. It's where people come together from across the spectrum of the state to work for a common goal. I looked through the list of bills that we've had today and yesterday, or on Friday, and throughout the session. And in a given legislative session, Mr. President, we may have 8, 9, 10 bills that the elbows start to get a little sharp and we start to argue in this room. But for the most part, we've worked together, we've worked it through the process, through the committee process, and we discuss it here on the floor, and the bill might pass with 34-0, 33-1, 32-2. That's the majority of the bills in this place, because we worked the process. Now, have things changed since some members have been here and one party is in charge over another? That has changed in the state of West Virginia. But what continues to stay the same in the Senate is that there's a desire to work together. There's a desire to offer amendments together, to introduce bills together, to work through problems that may be partisan in nature, to make it so that it's solving something and not just furthering it in ideology. So I've always enjoyed that about the Senate, and I've always thought that being the upper chamber, we've taken that and always run with it. And I think that this place is a much more problem-solving, solutions-based body than being driven strictly by ideology. And so I've appreciated that since I've been here, and I know that that's going to continue under your leadership and under the leadership of our committee chairs and under the leadership of the minority leader. I know that we're going to continue that. And so, Mr. President, as we move through the rest of the session, I think that we do take into account that we have different thoughts. And maybe on some of these big bills, it's just, there isn't going to be a reconciliation. But for the most part, we've learned to work together. There are 34 of us. We know each other. We trust one another. And so we're going to continue to move forward in that fashion. So, Mr. President, I appreciate your leadership. The minority leader, I appreciate his leadership on this issue. Thank you.
Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I request unanimous consent that the appendix to the journal for the Senate have printed in it the most welcome call to unity made by our colleague from the 16th and the exposition by the senator from Brooke on the superiority of the Senate to the House of Delegates.
Is there objection? Chair hears none. So ordered. Further remarks? Miscellaneous business. Senior Senator from the 17th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Pending announcements, I move the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m.
Are there announcements? Senator from Morgan.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on the Judiciary will meet this afternoon at 3:00 p.m. in the Judiciary Committee room in the West Wing.
Senior Senator from the 4th.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Finance will meet today at 3 p.m. and 4:51 a.m. We have our last budget hearing of this session with the Department of Administration.
Senator from Wood.
Your Committee on Banking and Insurance will meet today at 2 p.m., room 451M.
Senator from Upshur.
The Natural Resource Committee will meet at 1 p.m.
Senator from Wetzel.
Thank you, Mr. President. Your Committee on Transportation and Infrastructure will meet tomorrow morning at 10 a.m., 4:51 a.m. The agenda is posted.
Are there further announcements? If not, the question before the Senate is the Senate stand adjourned until tomorrow at 11 a.m. All those in favor will say aye. Those opposed, no. The ayes appear to have it. The ayes do have it. I declare the Senate adjourned.